Social media has fundamentally changed how investigations are conducted. Platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, X, LinkedIn, TikTok, Reddit, and others provide investigators with unprecedented access to information about individuals, networks, beliefs, movements, and behaviors. This accessibility, however, has created a persistent and dangerous tension in modern investigations. Just because information is visible does not mean it should be collected. It doesn't mean it should be used. And it doesn't mean it should be relied upon without limits. In this video, we'll focus on that tension. Specifically, we will examine where legitimate open source intelligence collection ends, and where investigative overreach begins, and why legal and ethical boundaries matter as much as technical capability. For investigators and analysts, understanding these boundaries are not optional. They're a central requirement of our role to ensure professional credibility, case integrity, and public trust. One common misconception in investigative work is the idea that public information is unrestricted. Social media platforms reinforce this illusion by making content easy to access, searchable, and shareable. From a technical perspective, many posts are publicly visible. From a professional and legal perspective, however, visibility does not equal permission. Investigators and analysts operate under standards that are far more restrictive than governing private citizens. What a member of the public might view casually can carry significant legal and ethical implications when viewed by someone acting in a professional or official capacity. This distinction becomes especially important when investigations are being scrutinized, whether it's by courts, regulators, oversight bodies, defense counsel, or even internal reviews and professional standards. One of the most overlooked aspects of social media investigations is who's doing the searching. When investigators access social media in a professional capacity, they're not acting as private individuals. They're acting under institutional authority. This distinction changes everything. Courts and oversight bodies often assess not only what information was accessed, but how and by whom it was accessed. Investigators may be subject to constitutional constraints, regulatory requirements, statutory limitations, internal policies and procedures of your agency, professional codes of conduct. Certain actions that might be acceptable for journalists, researchers, or private citizens may be inappropriate or even unlawful for investigators. One of the clearest ethical and legal fault lines in social media investigations concerns misrepresentation. Creating fake profiles, using false identities, or engaging subjects under deceptive pretenses can raise serious concerns. While some jurisdictions allow limited undercover activity online, such actions typically require explicit authorization, clear operational justification, a defined scope and duration, as well as oversight and documentation. Those investigators and analysts who engage in deception without authorization risk contaminating evidence, violating policy, and undermining the integrity of the investigation. Importantly, even passive deception, such as following private accounts under a false name, can be problematic if it circumvents reasonable expectations of privacy or platform safeguards. Consider expectations of the public, the shock test. One other major boundary involves private or restricted content. Public posts are one category. Content shared with limited audience, closed groups, or private accounts are another. Attempting to access restricted content without lawful authority can constitute overreach, even if technical access is possible. Investigators must ask, is this content truly public? Am I authorized to access it in this manner? Would accessing this content withstand external review? The test is not whether access was technically feasible, but whether it was legitimate, authorized, and defensible. Let's now talk about platform circumvention in terms of service. While terms of service on a platform are not criminal law, ignoring them can still create investigative risk. Using scraping tools, automated collection, or prohibited methods to harvest social media data may violate platform rules. This can lead to things like evidence challenges. The platform may refuse to cooperate with us, both now and in the future. Our agency and even ourselves might suffer reputational damage. There may be legal complications. Investigators must balance efficiency with compliance. Cutting corners in data collection often creates long-term problems that far outweigh short-term gains. An ethical investigation is guided by purpose limitation, by collecting only what is necessary to achieve a defined investigative objective. Now, social media platforms encourage over-collection. Profiles often contain years of personal content unrelated to any investigation. Collecting excessive material increases privacy risks and weakens justification. Investigators should be able to articulate why specific content was reviewed, how it relates to the investigation, why broader collection was unnecessary. Proportionality is a key ethical principle. The broader the collection, the stronger the justification must be. Let's consider overreach through scope creep. Consider an investigation into financial misconduct. An investigator begins reviewing a subject's public social media profile, firstly to verify employment claims. During this review, the investigator encounters personal posts unrelated to the case, maybe family photos, public opinions, maybe health disclosures. If an investigator documents or retains this unrelated material without justification, scope creep has occurred. Professional discipline requires restraint. Investigators must actively limit themselves, not simply collecting everything they can see, but collecting what is within scope. A post shared publicly to a broad audience carries a different expectation of privacy than content shared within a small group or under contextual assumptions of limited exposure. Investigators must consider things like audience size and intent, norms associated with that particular platform, user settings and behavior. What are the profile settings? What deliberate choices has that user made to limit access? An ethical investigation or analysis requires more than simply checking whether a post is technically visible. It requires understanding how and why that content was shared in the first place. Social media investigations do not only raise legal concerns, but they also introduce analytical risks. We must remember that social media content is curated, it's performative, it's often exaggerated or misleading. An image is presented by the user to the world. There may be a reason for that. An over-reliance on online personas can distort investigative judgment. Having these ethical boundaries help mitigate these risks by forcing investigators to contextualize and corroborate rather than assume. One of the most effective protections against overreach is through proper documentation. As investigators, as analysts, we should document the purpose of the social media review, the scope and limitations, the methods that we've used, any authorizations that we may have been granted. Having these things documented showcases intent, restraint, and professionalism. It also protects investigators and analysts when decisions are later questioned. Poor documentation, by contrast, creates suspicion, even if the actions were lawful. Investigators must remember that social media investigations rarely remain private. Reports are reviewed, evidence is challenged, decisions are scrutinized. Ethical boundaries exist not to hinder investigations, but to ensure they survive and stand up to scrutiny. The question investigators should ask themselves is not, can I access this, but rather, should I access this? Can this be justified later? In conclusion, open source intelligence does not mean unlimited access. Legal boundaries, ethical boundaries will define legitimacy, not convenience. For investigators and analysts, professionalism requires restraint, documentation, and accountability. The credibility of investigations and investigators depend not only on what is discovered, but how it's discovered. The most effective investigators are not those who collect the most information, but those who collect the right information for the right reasons in the right way. Now that is the difference between open source and overreach.